and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you how I turned this textured platter using a Dremel and the lathe. Now this project was really quick and it was a really fun project to have a go with. I wanted to try and practice using a Dremel as I've got a bigger project coming up that I didn't want to try using a Dremel on for the first time, as if I ruined it, it would be quite an expensive piece of wood to waste, whereas this is a tiny little piece of wood and I wasn't too fussed about the overall outcome. However, I think it's turned out really cool. We've got a couple of little bits of errors, I guess you could call them, but I really like it and it feels really smooth to the touch. Even with these bits of texture, they're really lovely. They've got texture to them, but they're smooth at the same time, which I think is quite cool. So if I just get out the camera's way, hopefully you can see that we've got a nice little platter there. And it's finished with food safe oil from Chestnut products. So let's get making this textured platter. I started out by roughing the blank into round. Now I had been using this for off-centre work, so it really wasn't particularly round, but because it was only small it didn't take very long to rough out. So this whole project was turned using this round scraper. I would usually use something like a bowl gouge or something like that, but I don't have a bowl gouge, so I find I can turn all of my bowls with a round scraper and still get a very nice finish, as long as you ensure you keep the bevel rubbing, and then that just ensures you get a really smooth finish. And obviously you can just experiment and see what works best. If I'm doing something like a spindle project, obviously I'll use a skew and a spindle gouge and a spindle roughing gouge and things like that. But for faceplate work, a round scraper works really well for me, but I will start learning how to use a bowl gouge. I then remounted the blank onto the lathe. To do this I used my glue gun method, which is essentially just a sacrificial piece of wood with the blank glued to it. Now this is a really good way to glue blanks to the lathe and it's surprisingly really strong. I did of course have to turn it a little bit on the outside in order to make sure it was perfectly round again. I then hollowed out the inside, which took less than 5 minutes, and then I sanded up from 120 grit all the way up to 400 grit, and this provided a nice surface on which I could do the Dremel aspect, which was what I was really excited about. So as you can see, it's a nice warm day, so I've got the lathe moved to the centre of the workshop. And I've turned this tiny sapili dish. It did have a little bit of woodworm there, so I just filled it with a bit of sawdust and a bit of CA glue. Now, I'm personally quite happy with this. This is a tiny blank, and I mean really tiny. It's about 25mm deep, and it's about 105mm across. So it's a very small little dish, and the main reason I'm actually doing this is to practice with the Dremel, and I want to carve a series of lines across the surface of this platter. Now this is purely for decoration and just to see how it goes. I don't really care whether this works or not, it's just practice. That's why I've used a really small scrap of wood that I used to use as a sacrificial plate for turning my off-centre bowls and things. Okay, so I got this Dremel Flexi Pen thing for my birthday, and I think it should be a real help when doing this. So what I'm going to do is turn this, carve. Now I haven't even practiced with this yet, so what I'm going to do is just put a piece of scrap wood on here and just have a quick go using the pen. So I'm going to be using the Dremel 3000 to make this project with, and the Dremel 3000 is a great little Dremel and it's fairly affordable. And then I've also got the Flexi Shaft pen on here, which, as I said, this just gives me so much more control over the whole project, I guess, because you can really grip it and you can get a lovely element of control, whereas if you try and use this, as you can see, this is just huge in comparison and it's quite bulky to use. I mean, the Dremel is a great tool, however, this is a lot better than just using the Dremel alone. So then you can hang this up from something. I just hang it off the corner of my lathe cart, and then I can use this to do all of the detail and texturing work. Now originally I was going to use a cylindrical burr to do the carving, and I did initially try this, however I didn't particularly like the result I was getting, so I decided to switch things up and use a sphere shaped burr, and this worked so much better. Unfortunately you can't actually see what I'm doing because I decided to stick my head in front of the camera. However, all I was doing was just randomly shaping this and just placing the burr in different positions in order to create an interesting texture. Well, I've had a bit of an experiment. I don't know whether I like it, but I've done it. It's definitely different, and yeah, it's experimental, so that's always good. I'm actually going to apply food safe oil as a finish. Now, I haven't applied an oil finish to a bowl since I really properly started, when I first started trying to make bowls and things, so it'd be quite interesting to apply an oil finish. The reason I've opted for an oil finish is because of this heavily textured rim, because you just cannot easily get a wax into that. And also, I was thinking whether to sand off the pen marks or not, but personally I think they add a real depth to it because you get the contrast between the burning bits and you get some depth to it. I really like all of the colours and the patterns. I think it's quite nice where you get the burnt bits. If you didn't want the burnt bits, then just don't stay so long on one section, because what happens is the tool heats up. As the tool, or the bit should I say, heats up, obviously it's going to char the surface. Now personally I really like that effect, however I'm sure there's plenty of people who really don't like that. So I'm just going to really try and get that oil into this surface. Now as I said, this is all experimental, so I'm not particularly fussed about the actual finish and the turning aspect of this. I don't really care how good the turning finish is on this. It's about the dremeling and the practice of that. I then used a clean piece of cloth just to give it a good burnish, and then I took it off the lathe. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed following along with this build project. It was really cool making this, and I definitely want to try using a Dremel in future projects. As I said, I have got one project in mind that I want to use the Dremel on, and I think it'd be a great project to have a go with. But this was a proof of a concept, I guess, and it was really, really fun to use the Dremel. Now, I had a flexi shaft on the Dremel, which made it so much easier to use, as it wasn't so cumbersome and it felt like using a pen on a project, and I could get quite a lot of detail and control using the Dremel. So I would really recommend, if you've got a Dremel, definitely get the flexi shaft. Well, thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I had an absolute blast making this, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing some more Dremel and texturing projects. Thanks for watching.